What up, though? Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Lawrence Report. And y'all, BMF is heating up. We're on episode 3. And my goodness, we had what's the word I'm looking for? A diet Tupac in this episode right here. We had a little baby who didn't give a lot of energy like I thought he was going to give. But hey, BMF, y'all. So far, the season has been slowly cooking, but now, like I said earlier, things are heating up. The pace is picking up, and my goodness, this was a pretty good episode that's going to set up a lot of things going forward. So let's get into episode 3 of BMF. So in episode 3 of BMF, a lot of this episode here evolves around Jack the Rapper weekend, which is basically a big baller shot caller convention for those that love music. And there's a lot of money that is meant to be made this weekend right here, because in this weekend you get a chance to network, meet other people who enjoy music. And again, like I said, that's a lot of money to be made. So if you're one of the ballers in the city, you want to be at this Jack the Rapper convention right here, right? So this episode right here basically starts off with Meech arriving back to his home, right? And while he's walking his home, he ends up getting bum rushed by the two guys who basically, hijacked his home and hijacked Stacks, right? They end up leaving with some money. These guys basically end up leaving Stacks' home where him and Meech was staying, and basically they got robbed, for lack of better terms, right? And now Meech is pissed because they ask him to shorten his flow of what he's trying to do. So he also ends up talking to Angel, right? And he's asking Angel, was it you who set us up with the MKs? Like, did you set this deal up right here? She's like, no, I had nothing to do with it. At the same time, the guy Greeny Green, aka Neo's character, he is very suspicious, as we already know, when it comes to Angel and Meech, right? And he's like, listen, there's a lot of money to be made. I'm the one that cleans your money. And keep in mind, the words I say, cleans your money. We are going to come back to that later on in this episode, because it's going to set up something that's going to be really, really big later in this episode. And we're going to see both Terry and Meech, when it comes to their crews, a lot of these guys and their crews and their posse, whatever, are going to turn their backs on them. A lot of it's due to jealousy. A lot of it's due to the drugs, whatever, not being all there. A lot of it just, these guys are getting antsy how the product is not moving the way they expect it to move, right? And we see that happening early in this episode with Terry, right? He's talking to his crew, and, some of his crew ends up going with Henrietta, believe it or not. We saw Henrietta in the last episode, right? So then, while he's talking to his crew, he ends up getting a phone call, and the phone call is none other than Markeisha. Him and Markeisha been on the rocks. Markeisha, she ends up calling him, and, she's like, listen, I'm home alone. You trying to come through? We all know what that means when you say you're trying to come through. But, he tells her that I'm handling business right now. I've been working with Terry Jr. I've been enjoying spending time with him and LaWanda. She's like, LaWanda? Of course, that's automatically going to set Markeisha off, right? So for Meech and his crew, he tells, everybody that's around him, like, listen, we're going to this Jack the Rapper event, right? We're going to make some things shake. We're going to be okay, y'all. We are going to be solid. Don't worry about the MKs, anybody else. I got us. We're going to make moves at this Jack the Rapper event. But it seems like everybody is not on board. I'm talking about Stacks. Back at Meech's house or whatever, you got Duffy there. You got Stacks, aka 2 Chainz character. And I don't think that we can trust Stacks' character. I believe he is going to end up betraying the whole BMF family eventually, but we will see how he ends up doing that. Like I said, he can't be trusted, because in fact, he ends up going off on Meech, right? He's like, listen, Stacks is like, listen, we still gotta ride for Top Washington. We gotta take care of Remy. And Meech is like, listen, I got that, but at the same time, it's gonna happen in due time, right? So, of course, we know that Meech, he ended up losing the money. He got robbed, like I said earlier. Well, he had the money, but 2 Chainz, basically, not 2 Chainz, but Stacks got robbed, right? So that was Meech's money, whatever. So, in order to basically get the money back, what Meech decided to do was pawn some of his rollies, right? So he got to feed the family, right? He got to feed his homies, right? So he ends up giving them Stack some money, right? And of course, Stack, for example, he don't like that right there. He's like, yo, You think you Moses around here? So one of Stax's boys is like, listen, you ain't never pawned nothing for us. And we see little baby. Little baby's like, listen, when I'm in Atlanta, you already know I'm running with Meech and them. And for Meech, considering that his last house basically got hit up, now he's in a gated community out there in Decatur. You know what they say in Decatur, everything's greater, right? So, he comes up with this plan basically to get this gated community house, but there's one tiny problem. Somebody has to sign for the house. Yeah, so when I mentioned that, Meech had to get somebody to sign over for him, it ends up being his father, Charles. Charles does come around, but again, he was kind of nervous about putting his name on the line for this new home, but he does come through. Now let me switch things over to Terry. Terry is talking about the history of BMF and things of that nature, but again, these guys pretty much tell Terry, you ain't your brother, and we don't like the way you've been out here maneuvering. So a lot of those guys don't believe in him. But there's one guy, one of his homeboys that does decide to stay. This guy right here has the intel on Henrietta. So, Terry tells him, listen, I need to know every move that Henrietta is making. Later, we finally get a chance to see Detective Bryant. He is basically now working with Henrietta. From there, he tells Henrietta, he's like, listen, I'm just here to get the protection that I need to get my son free, to get him out of here. What do you need me to do? And she's like, listen, I got a shipment for you. That could be your first job for me. And he tells her, well, with this shipment right here, it needs to be under a vehicle that nobody would think it would be under when it comes to, the crew basically moving around these drugs, moving around this weight. And Henrietta's looking at him like, you know what? You're a smart man. I like the way you think. Now, when it comes to this package right here, I said that, they was trying to drive a vehicle that nobody would suspect. So they end up taking, it was Brian and Detective Brian and Twan, they end up taking a emergency vehicle, right? Ambulance vehicle. And while they're, trying to transport the package, they end up getting intercepted. They end up getting intercepted by Terry's people. And unfortunately, the whole package ordeal goes into shambles, right? There's a shootout that's happening, and we also see deep in the cut, we end up seeing Detective Veronica, Jen, and Kelly, who they're there as well, and they end up trying to bust everything up, but unfortunately, Veronica, she ends up getting shot basically, and she ends up looking up and she ends up seeing Detective Brian. I'm all for Lucille out here getting her swerve on, right? So Lucille and another member from the church is basically in the kitchen getting ready for this event that they're having. And this other church member is encouraging Lucille to basically get out here and start dating. And she ends up going on this little date with Dr. Maurice. And Dr. Maurice, they're reminiscing about the old days, and they're eating this something called popcorn balls, right? And they talk about how, they thought this type of popcorn ball was shut down. But Dr. Maurice made some calls. He had them shipped in just for Lucille because he knew that was basically one of the favorite things she loved. Considering that, Twan was basically family to Henrietta, he ended up getting popped. And, back at their lair, whatever, she's basically hurting for Twan, right? And Detective Brian, he tells her, listen, if you want to get back at Twan, you're going to have to basically take down BMF. Now, this part right here, what I'm about to say, is very cold and calculated, especially for Terry, right? He ends up getting a visit from Child Protection Services, right? And a lady comes to the door saying, listen, I'm here on behalf of Terry Jr. I heard, this house is not being upkept. I need to investigate. And, Meech and, LaWanda, her mom was there, like, listen, I don't know why you're here. Everything is good. But this lady insists on basically almost getting ready to take away Terry Jr. So Meech ends up seeing his father at this event. He thought his father's going to be in the hotel. I'm like, bro, listen. He's not going to come all the way down here on this plane to sign these papers for you for the house and then just sit in the hotel. Like, that's not happening. not my guy, but Charles, I almost said my guy, but Charles out here, he's like, listen, I've been stressed out from Lucille to these boys. This event is going to help me take off the cool. So Charles out here out and about networking, right? But we also see Glock. We have been waiting to see Glock for a while. Glock has been lurking in the shadows. So like I said, Glock was basically in the shadows lurking when it came to Meech and his father, right? So also at this, this Jack the Rapper event, we end up meeting this this Fashion Nova Tupac, right? So I guess to play Tupac in a series or BMF, all you need is basically a bald head and a bandana. And we end up finding out that this Miami killer, and he has this big old necklace. It looks like a shark tooth, right? This Miami killer is actually Glock, right? And Meech, he realizes it as well. He tells him, listen, I've been trying to smoke you out the shadows, right? But at the same time, this Miami killer, Glock, he says, listen, I own security around here, and I own the money that you cleaning when it comes to the little partner that you're working with. Basically, I'm paraphrasing here, at the strip club, he's talking about Greeny. He's saying that, hey, I own Greeny. Greeny works for me. Because if you remember, I said at the top of the video, Greeny is going to mention something about cleaning money. So those two guys, Glock and Greeny, are in this thing together. Club, outside in the car, we see Greeny, not the Greeny that we know that has always been happy and friendly and easygoing guy. We end up seeing a Greeny that's very controlling and very just mean spirited, right? He ends up telling Angel, like, listen, you ain't nothing without me. As a matter of fact, I want you to say it. She ends up saying it, but at the same time, Meech and Duffy end up coming to her rescue because it was Greeny that basically has been being a snake when the whole situation when it comes to Glock and with Meech and them getting set up. So Duffy and Meech, they end up, beating him up pretty bad, and we just want to see how things are going to turn out because as far as Angel, she ends up leaving with Meech. As we continue to get closer to the end, we see Lucille. She's basically thinking about Dr. Maurice, but Charles comes in. Lucille reveals to him that Terry Jr. could be basically placed in a foster care type situation. And Lucille's like, listen, it's been a long day. I'm going to go to bed. It looks like Charles is about to unpack his bag to see a picture of him and Meech outside of the house. I was happy to see that right there. But as he sits down, he ends up seeing a check that is basically kind of sending out. We all know that check came from Dr. Maurice. And the look on Charles' face is like absolutely speechless because now he's wondering who wrote this check out. And this part right here, I absolutely hate it. I hate what's happened to Kevin, right? We end up seeing Kevin, Detective Brian's son. He ends up coming to visit his dad, but he's kind of limping. I'm assuming he basically got beat up in jail. I hate this for him. He ain't got his comic books no more. He can't write about Bruiser, draw Bruiser. Detective Brian tells his son, listen, I'm working hard as I can. And as he's leaving, getting ready to go to his car, we end up seeing Terry there. Terry's like, yo, how's little Kev doing? A little small talk here and there. And, Terry's like, listen, why don't we work together? We can squash whatever we got. You must be extremely desperate to work with Henrietta. And really, Detective Brian is really desperate. I mean, he's down to his last straw, willing to do anything for his son. And Terry tells him, listen, well, actually, I should say that Detective Brian says, listen, when it comes to me and my son, I'm going to handle this. That's basically what he's trying to let Terry know. But Terry tells him, listen, it's either you get with us and you get with us on our side of town and roll with us or get rolled over. And you know what Detective Brian says? You know what? I'd rather get rolled over. And basically what Detective Brian is saying, listen, my son shouldn't be in these jail cells. It should be y'all if we're being honest. So he's going to be hell-bent and hell-driven and making sure, as we already know, eventually Meech and Terry go to prison for a long time. BMF, y'all, episode 3. Comment below. Tell me your favorite scene of this episode. And as always, thank you for tuning in to the Lawrence Report.